My daughter looked me dead in the eye and said I wasn't welcome at her wedding because I was too embarrassing, too dramatic, and too much of a liability. So she uninvited me from the most important day of her life like I was a stranger who meant nothing. But she forgot one thing. She forgot that I knew secrets that could unravel everything she thought she understood about herself. And when she walked down that aisle expecting her perfect day, I was there waiting with the one person who would change her world forever. This is how I made sure Emma learned that some mothers don't disappear quietly when their children try to erase them. I raised Emma alone from the time she was 3 years old, when her father Michael walked out on us for his secretary, leaving behind nothing but empty beer bottles and unpaid bills. I worked double shifts at the diner, scraping grease off plates until my hands cracked. I sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay for her dance classes. I slept on the couch so she could have the bedroom with the window that caught morning light, and I never once told her the truth about why her daddy never came home for Christmas. I just said some people aren't built for staying, and left it at that. Emma grew up believing Michael was her biological father because that's what I let her believe. It was easier than explaining that her real father was someone I met during one desperate summer when Michael and I were separated, someone who showed me kindness when I thought I'd forgotten what that felt like. Someone who never knew he had a daughter because I was too proud and too scared to tell him. When Michael came crawling back with promises and flowers, I chose stability over truth. I chose the devil I knew over the good man I was falling for, and I buried that secret so deep I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. But secrets have a way of growing in the dark, and 25 years later when Emma announced her engagement to Bradley from her law firm, I thought maybe it was time to let some light in. I thought maybe she deserved to know where half her DNA came from, maybe she deserved to understand why she had his eyes, his stubborn chin, his way of humming when she was thinking deeply. I thought wrong, because when I sat her down that Tuesday evening with tea and intention, Emma looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "What do you mean my real father?" she said, her voice sharp like broken glass. "Michael is my father. You can't just rewrite history because you're feeling sentimental about your past." I tried to explain, tried to tell her about David, the man who taught me to laugh again during those 3 months when I thought my marriage was over. But she held up her hand like a stop sign. "I don't want to hear this," she said. "Michael raised me. Michael was there for dance recitals and graduations and everything that mattered. You don't get to take that away from me now." I understood her anger, I did, but I thought she'd come around. I thought after the shock wore off she'd want to know about David, about the man whose kindness lived in her bones, whose sense of justice made her choose law, whose quiet strength helped her navigate the world with grace. But Emma didn't want grace, she wanted control. And when she realized I wouldn't let this go, when she realized I was serious about bringing truth into the light, she made a choice that cut deeper than any betrayal I'd ever known. "If you can't respect my wishes," she said, standing in my kitchen with her arms crossed like armor, "then you can't be at my wedding. I won't have you disrupting the most important day of my life with your delusions." Delusions, that's what she called 25 years of carrying the weight of her origin story. Delusions, because it was easier to dismiss me than face the possibility that everything she thought she knew about herself might be built on silence and compromise. I sat in that kitchen after she left, staring at the cup of tea that had gone cold in my hands, feeling the familiar ache of being dismissed by someone I'd given everything to save. But this time was different. This time I wasn't going to swallow my words and accept being erased, because Emma wasn't a confused 3-year-old anymore. She was a grown woman about to promise her life to someone, and she deserved to know the whole truth about where she came from, even if she didn't want to hear it. That night I did something I hadn't done in 25 years. I googled David Morrison. My fingers trembled as I typed his name into the search bar, not knowing if he was alive or dead, if he was married or single, if he ever thought about that summer when we almost changed each other's lives forever. But there he was, David Morrison, attorney at law, with his own practice in the city 2 hours away. Still handsome, still kind-looking in his professional headshot, still wearing that gentle smile that made me believe in possibility all those years ago. I stared at that photo for an hour, trying to work up the courage to call the number listed on his website, wondering what I would even say, wondering if he remembered me at all. But then I thought about Emma walking down that aisle believing a lie, and I picked up the phone before I could lose my nerve. The receptionist was polite, professional, asked if I wanted to schedule a consultation. I said yes, gave my name, and when she asked what type of legal matter I needed help with, I said, "It's personal," and left it at that. David agreed to see me that Friday. I drove 2 hours through spring rain, rehearsing what I would say, how I would explain why I was showing up in his office after a quarter century of silence. But when his assistant led me into his office and he looked up from his desk, I forgot every word I'd practiced. He was older, of course, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes, but still him. Still the man who used to bring me coffee in the morning and listen to my dreams without judgment. Sarah, he said my name like a prayer, like he'd been waiting 25 years to say it again. I wondered if you'd ever call. We talked for 3 hours. I told him about Emma, about the marriage that limped along for 10 more years after our summer, about the divorce, the single motherhood, the sacrifices. And somewhere in the middle of explaining why I'd never told him about his daughter, I started crying, not the pretty tears you see in movies, but the ugly, desperate sobbing of someone who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. David handed me tissues, didn't rush me, didn't judge, just waited. And when I finally got control of myself, he said, "Can I see a picture of her?" I showed him Emma's engagement photo and watched recognition dawn in his eyes the same way it had dawned in mine every time I looked at our daughter, the same stubborn jawline, the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking, the same eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. "She's beautiful," he said. "She looks like you." But I could see he was thinking she looked like him too. "She doesn't want to meet you," I said. "She's angry at me for telling her the truth. She's banned me from her wedding because she thinks I'm trying to destroy her happiness." David was quiet for a long time, then he said, "What do you need from me, Sarah?" And I realized that was exactly what I'd been hoping he'd ask, because I had been thinking about this for days, thinking about Emma walking down that aisle with Michael, the man who'd abandoned us for 2 years, thinking about her starting her marriage with a lie at the foundation. "I want you to come with me to her wedding," I said, the words rushing out before I could stop them. "I want her to see you. I want her to understand that this isn't about destroying anything, it's about giving her the whole truth about who she is." David raised his eyebrows. "You want me to crash a wedding where neither of us is invited?" I nodded, feeling ridiculous but also feeling like this was the only way. "I know how it sounds, but David, she deserves to know you existed. She deserves to understand where she came from." He was quiet for so long I thought he was going to say no, thought he was going to tell me I was crazy and ask me to leave. But then he smiled, that same gentle smile that had undone me 25 years ago. "When's the wedding?" he asked, and I knew I had an ally, someone who understood that sometimes love means showing up even when you're not wanted, someone who understood that truth doesn't wait for convenient timing. The wedding was set for the following Saturday at the Botanical Gardens downtown. Emma had chosen the venue because she loved the way the light filtered through the greenhouse glass, the way the flowers seemed to bloom just for her special day. I knew because I'd helped her pick it out, back when I was still invited, back when she still called me Mom instead of Sarah, back when she still believed I had her best interests at heart. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me that she was getting married surrounded by growing things while trying to kill the truth. David and I met at a coffee shop that morning, both of us dressed appropriately for a wedding though neither of us had received an invitation. I wore the navy dress I'd bought for the occasion, the one Emma would have loved if she'd seen me in it. David wore a charcoal gray suit that made him look distinguished, successful, exactly the kind of man any daughter would be proud to call father. We must have looked like any other middle-aged couple getting ready for a celebration, instead of two people about to detonate a bomb. "Are you sure about this?" David asked, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "Once we do this, there's no taking it back." I nodded because I'd been sure since the moment Emma told me I wasn't welcome at her own wedding, since the moment she chose comfort over truth, since the moment she decided I was expendable. "She's getting married believing a lie," I said, "and I can't live with that anymore. I won't live with that anymore." We drove to the Botanical Gardens in separate cars, planned to arrive just as the ceremony was starting, not early enough to be stopped by security, but not so late that we'd miss the moment when Emma would see us, when she'd realize that truth doesn't disappear just because you don't invite it to your wedding. I parked 3 blocks away, walked through the neighborhood trying to calm my racing heart, trying to prepare for whatever came next. The gardens were beautiful, exactly as Emma had dreamed, white chairs arranged in perfect rows, guests in pastels and summer suits, the art she'd designed herself covered in white roses and baby's breath, the photographer capturing every moment of what she believed was her perfect day. I slipped in through the side entrance, found a spot in the back behind the last row of chairs where I could see everything but hopefully blend into the background until the right moment. David arrived 5 minutes later. I watched him scan the crowd, take in the scene, the beautiful bride's side packed with friends and family, the groom's side equally full of well-dressed people who belonged here, who had every right to witness this moment. We were the interlopers, the uninvited truth-tellers, the ones who were about to change everything. But I didn't feel guilty anymore. I felt resolved, because Emma deserved better than a foundation built on lies. The music started, that traditional wedding march that makes everyone stand and turn toward the back. I turned too, watched Emma appear at the entrance on Michael's arm, looking radiant in the dress we'd picked out together back when she still wanted my opinion. Back when she still believed I was someone worth including. She was everything a bride should be, glowing, confident, ready to step into her future. And seeing her like that almost made me lose my nerve, almost made me slip out the back and let her have this one perfect day built on comfortable fiction. But then I remembered what truth costs, and what lies cost more. She was halfway down the aisle when she saw me. I watched recognition hit her face, watched her smile falter for just a moment before she composed herself. But she saw me. She knew I was there. And she knew I hadn't come alone, because David was standing beside me now, his hand on my shoulder, both of us watching our daughter float toward her future like a ghost of every choice we'd made 25 years ago. Emma reached the altar, said her vows with a voice that only trembled once when she promised to honor and cherish Bradley forever and always. I wondered if she was thinking about honor as she spoke the words, if she was thinking about the choice between comfortable lies and inconvenient truths, but she got through it. She said I do and kissed her new husband while everyone applauded, and for a moment I thought maybe we could slip away unnoticed, maybe our presence would be enough, maybe she'd find us later and we could talk like adults, but Emma had other plans. During the receiving line, when guests were congratulating the happy couple and taking photos, she caught my eye and walked over, her dress rustling against the grass, her bouquet still in her hand. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low enough that only David and I could hear. "I told you not to come." I took a breath, steadied myself. "Emma, I want you to meet someone. This is David Morrison. But she cut me off. "I don't care who he is. You need to leave now, before you ruin everything." David stepped forward then, his voice gentle but firm. "Emma, I'm your father." He said it simply, without drama, without fanfare, just the truth spoken quietly between three people while the wedding reception swirled around us. "Your biological father. And I've wanted to meet you for 25 years. Emma went very still, her face cycling through confusion, anger, disbelief, and something else, something that might have been recognition, because sometimes the truth fits so perfectly into the spaces you didn't know were empty. "That's impossible," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "Michael is my father. He raised me. He was there for everything." David nodded. "He was, and I'm grateful to him for that. But Sarah and we had something before you were born. And when she discovered she was pregnant, she made a choice to protect you, to give you stability. I respect that choice, but you deserve to know where you came from." Emma looked between us, her eyes wide, her composure finally cracking. "This is insane. You can't just show up at my wedding and claim to be my father. This is my day. This is supposed to be perfect." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "It is perfect, sweetheart, but it's also built on something incomplete. You deserve to know the whole story about who you are, where you came from, what runs in your blood." "What runs in my blood," she repeated, and I could hear the attorney in her voice, the need for evidence, for proof, for something concrete to grab onto. David smiled that gentle smile. "Intelligence, for one thing. A sense of justice that runs so deep it chose your career for you. A way of humming when you're thinking that your mother tells me you've done since you were little. A stubbornness that serves you well when you're fighting for what's right." Emma was quiet for a long moment, the wedding reception continuing around us, guests laughing, children running between tables, the photographer capturing candid moments while our little triangle of truth stood frozen in time. Then she said, "Prove it," and I knew we had her. I knew the lawyer in her couldn't resist the need for evidence, the need to know for certain what was real and what was wishful thinking. David pulled out his phone, showed her photos from that summer 25 years ago, photos of him and me at the lake, at the farmer's market, at the little diner where we spent hours talking about everything and nothing. Photos that proved we existed together, that proved there was love there, even if it was complicated, even if it was brief. Emma studied each photo, her face unreadable, her attorney mask firmly in place, but I could see her mind working, could see her comparing features, dates, timelines. "We can do a DNA test," David said, "if that's what you need to be sure. But Emma, look at me, really look, and tell me you don't see yourself." She did look, studied his face the way she used to study me when she was little, trying to figure out which parent she resembled more. And I watched her see it, watched recognition dawn in her eyes the same way it had in David's office when he saw her photo for the first time. "Why now?" she asked finally. "Why tell me this on my wedding day of all days?" I took a deep breath. "Because you uninvited me, Emma. You decided I was too embarrassing, too dramatic to be part of your special day, and that hurt more than you know. But it also made me realize that you deserve better than a mother who keeps secrets. You deserve to know who you really are before you start your new life." Emma was crying now, not the ugly sobbing I'd done in David's office, but quiet tears that left tracks on her carefully applied makeup. "I don't know what to do with this," she said. "I don't know how to process this right now." Bradley is waiting, the reception is starting, everyone is watching. David reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a business card. "You don't have to do anything right now except know that I exist, that I've always existed, and that if you ever want to know more about where you came from, I'm here." She took the card, stared at it like it might explode in her hands. "Did you love her?" she asked David, and the question hit me like a physical blow because I'd wondered the same thing for 25 years, wondered if what we had was real or just the desperate clinging of two people trying to escape their own lives. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I loved her very much, and I would have loved you if I'd known about you." Emma nodded, wiped her tears, tried to compose herself. "I need to get back to my husband." She said the word husband like she was trying it on for size, like she was still getting used to the weight of it. "I need to think about this. I need time." I reached for her hand again, and this time she let me take it. "That's all I wanted, sweetheart, for you to know the truth, to have all the pieces of yourself, even the complicated ones." She squeezed my hand once, then let go. "Don't approach me again today," she said. "Let me have the rest of my wedding. Let me figure out what this means." I nodded because it was fair, because she was right, because sometimes truth is a gift that takes time to unwrap properly. But as she walked away, her dress trailing behind her, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. I felt like her mother again, like someone who mattered in her story. David and I left quietly, slipped out through the same side entrance I'd used to arrive. We drove to the coffee shop where we'd met that morning, sat across from each other like we had 25 years ago when everything was possible, when we thought we had all the time in the world to figure out what we meant to each other. "Do you think she'll call?" he asked, and I smiled because I knew Emma. I knew the stubborn curiosity that drove her to become a lawyer. I knew she couldn't leave questions unanswered. "She'll call," I said. "Maybe not today, maybe not this week, but she'll call because she's your daughter, and your daughters don't leave stones unturned." David laughed, a real laugh, full of relief and something that might have been hope. "What happens now?" he asked, and I realized I didn't know. I'd been so focused on getting to this moment, on making sure Emma knew the truth, that I hadn't thought about what came after. "Now we wait," I said. "We let her process. We let her decide what she wants to do with this information, and we respect whatever choice she makes." But even as I said it, I knew Emma wouldn't be able to let this go. She was too much like David, too driven by the need to understand, to dig deeper, to find the whole story, not just the version that was comfortable or convenient. Emma called 3 days later, her voice careful, controlled, like she was handling evidence in a high-stakes case. "I want to meet with both of you," she said. "Somewhere neutral, somewhere we can talk without interruptions." We met at a restaurant downtown, the kind of place where business deals were made and difficult conversations were had over expensive wine and carefully plated food. Emma arrived first. David and I found her at a corner table, already armed with a legal pad and what looked like a list of questions. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble, "and I need to know everything, the timeline, the details, why you made the choices you made, what happened after." So I told her about the separation from Michael, about feeling lost and lonely, about meeting David at the community center where I was taking a pottery class, about how he made me laugh for the first time in years, about how we spent 3 months learning each other's dreams. I told her about the phone call from Michael begging me to come home, promising to change, promising to be the husband and father we needed, and about the choice I made to try again, to give Emma the stability of a 2-parent home even if one of those parents was unreliable. I told her about discovering I was pregnant a month after Michael and I reconciled, about the impossible decision of whether to tell David about what was growing inside me. "I chose wrong," I said finally. "I chose what felt safe over what felt true, and I've regretted it every day since, not because I regret you, never because I regret you, but because I robbed you of knowing David, and I robbed David of knowing you, and I robbed all 3 of us of what we could have been together." Emma wrote everything down like she was preparing for trial, like she was building a case for or against something I couldn't identify. David told his side too, about the grief when I disappeared from his life, about the years he spent wondering what he'd done wrong, about the marriage he'd eventually entered and ended because he could never quite shake the feeling that he'd lost something irreplaceable, about the children he'd never had because somehow no other relationship felt as real as what we'd shared that summer. "I dreamed about you," he told Emma, "before I knew you existed. I used to dream about a daughter who looked like your mother but had my eyes. And every time I woke up I felt like I was mourning someone I'd never met." Emma's attorney facade cracked a little at that, her pen stilling on the legal pad, her eyes soft in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, and the question hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility and fear. What did we want from her? Forgiveness? Acceptance? A chance to build something new? Or just the knowledge that she knew the truth about herself? David spoke first. I want whatever you're willing to give, he said. If that's nothing, if you decide this is too much, too late, I'll respect that. But if you're willing, I'd like to know you. I'd like to be part of your life in whatever way makes sense. I nodded, agreeing. I just want you to have the whole picture of who you are, where you came from, what's possible for your future. Your children deserve to know their grandfather. They deserve to have all their family, not just the pieces that are convenient or comfortable. Emma was quiet for a long time, staring at her notes like they held answers to questions she was still formulating. Bradley wants to meet you, she said finally, and my heart stopped because I hadn't dared hope that she'd want to integrate this new reality into her marriage. Hadn't dared imagine that she'd see David as family worth knowing rather than a complication to manage. He says any man who could father someone like me deserves the benefit of the doubt. David smiled that gentle smile that had captured my heart all those years ago. I'd like that very much. Emma closed her legal pad, tucked her pen away. I'm not ready to call you Dad, she said to David. I may never be ready for that. Michael is my dad, he raised me, he was there for everything that mattered. But I'd like to know you. I'd like to understand where I came from, who I might have been if things had been different. David nodded. That's more than I ever hoped for, he said. That's everything. She turned to me then, her eyes still holding some hurt but also something softer, something that might forgive me eventually. I'm sorry I uninvited you from the wedding, she said. I was scared. I was protecting something that didn't need protecting, and I hurt you in the process. I reached across the table, took her hand. You were protecting your version of the truth, sweetheart. I understand that, but now you have the whole truth, and you get to decide what to do with it. We started slowly, dinners every few weeks, phone calls that grew longer and more frequent. David and Emma discovered they shared a love of hiking, of old movies, of spicy food that made them both tear up but refused to admit defeat. Bradley joined us sometimes, brought his own curiosity about family history, about the stories that shape us, about the difference between the parents who raise us and the people who create us. Emma never called David Dad, but she started calling him by his first name instead of David Morrison like he was opposing counsel. She started including him in family events, started asking his opinion on cases she was working on, started recognizing the parts of herself that came from him, the analytical mind, the careful consideration of all angles, the way she could argue any side of an issue but always landed on the side of justice. A year later, when Emma announced she was pregnant, she called us both at the same time, put us on speakerphone while she and Bradley shared the news. We want the baby to know all their grandparents, she said, and I cried happy tears for the first time in longer than I could remember, because this was what I'd wanted all along, not just for Emma to know the truth, but for that truth to become part of the foundation she was building for her own family. David and I never got back together, too much time had passed, too much life had been lived in the spaces between what we were and what we could have been. But we became friends, united by love for the daughter we'd created and the grandchild who would carry both our histories forward. We became co-conspirators in spoiling Emma's son, teaching him about family trees that have complicated roots but strong branches. Emma's son has David's eyes and my stubborn streak and his mother's sense of justice, already evident in the way he demands fairness in everything from snack distribution to bedtime stories. He calls David Papa David and me Grandma Sarah and Bradley's parents Grandma and Grandpa. Because family, he's learning early, can be bigger and more complicated and more wonderful than the neat categories we try to put it in. Sometimes I think about that wedding day, about the choice to show up uninvited with the truth in tow, about the risk of destroying Emma's perfect day in service of something bigger than perfection. And I know I made the right choice, not because everything worked out, not because we got a happy ending, but because truth, even difficult truth, even inconvenient truth, is always worth more than the most beautiful lie. Emma forgave me eventually, not just for keeping the secret, but for revealing it at her wedding, for choosing truth over her comfort, for insisting that she deserved to know where she came from even when she didn't want to know. We've never talked about whether she's grateful for what I did that day, but sometimes when I watch her with David, when I see them laugh at the same joke or solve a problem with the same methodical approach, I think she understands that some gifts come wrapped in disruption. The truth is messier than the story I protected for 25 years, but it's also richer, more complex, more honest about the way love actually works, not just the fairy tale version, but the version where people make impossible choices and live with the consequences, where secrets grow in the dark until they're too big to hide, where mothers love their children enough to risk being hated for telling the truth. Emma still keeps that business card David gave her at her wedding tucked in her wallet behind her driver's license, like a reminder that family is both who raises you and who creates you, That identity is both what you inherit and what you choose. That truth might arrive uninvited to your perfect day, but it's still worth letting in. And me? I sleep better now, knowing that Emma has the whole story of herself, knowing that her son will grow up with all his grandparents, knowing that love doesn't always look like what we expect, but it always looks like showing up, especially when you're not invited, especially when the truth is complicated, especially when the people you love need you to be brave enough to risk everything for what they deserve to know. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to disappear quietly when your children try to erase you. Sometimes it's insisting that truth matters more than comfort. Sometimes it's showing up to their wedding with their real father and trusting that love strong enough to create life is also strong enough to survive the disruption of perfect days built on beautiful lies.